Hello everybody, AJ Ryzik here, and the computer is built. It is up and running, and I could not be happier with the performance that I'm getting out of it now. Compared to my old system, video renders much faster. It never slows down. Essentially I've got all the power that I want. Gaming performance is out of the ballpark compared to what I used to have. So, all in all, this has been great. The build took a little bit longer than I had planned on. A big part of that was because of doing the video clips and taking pictures and getting it set up so that I could getting things set just right so that it could be filmed and whatnot. But in the end, ended up being a good project. Learned a whole lot. Not that I haven't built computers before, but it's been a while since I've done a build. Let me go to a shot of of my workstation in my home office, and there you can see. I turn the lights out so you can see the red glow of the computer from the two front-facing fans. I think that's pretty cool looking. But there's the computer sitting right beside my two monitors and my desk, which, as usual, is a complete mess. But it kind of gives you an idea what it looks like and whatnot. So let's move on, and I'm going to kind of walk you through the whole build process step by step, at least as much as I possibly can. So the build started with mounting the CPU and the heatsink onto the motherboard. Now, I mounted those before I put the motherboard into the case, just because you're not trying to work inside this case. You don't have cramped working space. It just seemed like the easier route to go, rather than to put the motherboard in the case first and then add the CPU, the cooler, and so on and so forth. So anyway, working with the CPU, handle it very much with care. You only want to hold it on the edges. You do not want to touch the bottom side of this thing. Now, if you take a look at this picture that I've taken here, you can see a little triangle in one corner, and then on the mounting point on the motherboard, you can see there's another little triangle. Those are like think of them as alignment points. So you want the little triangles to match up. So all you're going to do at that point is nice and easy, put the CPU down on the CPU pad, and then pull down the little locking lever to get it locked into place. With the CPU mounted, next step was to add the CPU cooler. So here's a look at my CPU cooler, and you can see there is a piece of protective plastic across the bottom plate. You want to peel that off, because the last thing that you want is either this thing melting, or at the very least you don't get thermal contact and your CPU overheats. So peel that off. And then next thing I did was get the mounting bracketry all set up and ready to go. And here's my one criticism for Cooler Master. While I like their products, at least in the case of this CPU cooler, the diagrams on how to add the mounting hardware left a lot to be desired. So in a way, I got out the stock CPU cooler that came with the CPU, and kind of used that as a guide on, okay, this is how you want to set up your bracketry. Once I kind of saw what it looked like, what the bracketry looked like on the stock cooler, I was able to go with the Cooler Master cooler and get it all set up and ready to go. So I got the mounting bracketry all set up on it. Next thing you want to do is you want to get a little bit of thermal paste on your CPU. So here is a shot of me adding the thermal paste to the CPU. Probably you want a blob that's about the size of a pea, maybe a little bit smaller. Now the tube that I had, it came out in like a really skinny snake-like string, so you really don't get a blob as such, but about the volume of a pea, maybe a little bit less is what you want, so that you want to get a nice even spread across your CPU. But at the same time, you don't want so much on there that it squeezes out the sides and whatnot, because a lot of the thermal paste will conduct electricity. So if you get it all over things on your motherboard, you are in for all kinds of problems. So got the thermal paste on there, and then the next step is going to be actually mounting the CPU cooler. Kind of ease it into place and get that bracketry all mounted up, and then over on the one side there is a locking lever. You just want to twist that down and it locks in place. Now this is for the AMD processors. If you're putting in an Intel processor and Intel cooler, the lockdowns and whatnot are a little bit different, but not so different that you'd be totally lost. So the time was here to put the motherboard into the case. Now my case came with the standoffs pre-installed. Now if you don't know what the standoffs are, think of them as little pegs that screw into your case, and they elevate or lift the motherboard up off the motherboard tray, so you get a little bit of ventilation between the tray and the motherboard, and also you don't get any metal to metal contact, which might not be good for the motherboard. But anyway, I had standoffs pre-installed in this case. Not all of them were in the correct spot, so I had a couple that I had to pull out, a couple to put back in. I did have extra standoffs that came with the case, so no issues there. Used a 5mm socket, and it's just unscrew the ones you didn't need, screw the new ones in, boom, good to go. So once I got that done, it was time to put the I/O shield into place. Now the I/O shield, it's basically where all of your ports are on the back side of your computer or your computer case. It's just a little shield that matches up all the ports on your motherboard, so you don't have just this big gaping hole. Now the I/O shield ended up being a little bit of a pain in the butt to get it to pop into place, but it finally went, and so then we were finally ready to put the motherboard into place. And as far as installing the motherboard, I mean, it's simply nice and easy. Put it in its place right over the top of the standoffs. Get the screw holes aligned with the standoffs. Screw it into place, and boom, you're done. Now this is one of those places where you definitely want to have a very long screwdriver. Just because sometimes you're just not able to get at the screw holes without with anything that's got a short stubby shaft on it or whatever. And then once all that's mounted up, it's time to move on. Next, I installed the graphics card. Now I did a quick kind of layout to figure out which expansion slots it would fall into, and then remove the covers for those. And it was actually ended up being two expansion slots. So removed those, slid the graphics card into place, and you'll kind of feel it click into place. And then once it's in place, it's a matter of just reusing the screws that were holding the expansion slot covers in place. Reuse those to tighten your graphics card down, and then that part of it's done. Other than hooking up the wiring, which I did all the wiring at the same time. So I installed the power source next. Really simple and easy to do. Simply put the power source in place, bottom rear of the case. Feed the screws in through the back of the case, tighten them down, and boom, you're done. Now, here's a point where I got to point out some of the thoughtful design that went into the case. With the power source, it draws air up from the bottom through the ventilation holes that are in the bottom of the case, and then spits out the cooling air out the back of the case, so it does not add any hot air to the case. you know, a lot of the OEM cases, they either they suck air in from inside of the case, air that's already somewhat heated probably, or they're expelling air inside of the case that is heated. So, like I said, it's just one of those little thoughtful design things that more manufacturers should take note of. Installing drives was next, and I've got a few, so let's take a look at what I got, and I'll kind of explain why I've got so many. First on the list is the DVD drive, which was recycled from the old computer. It's basic read and write capability. Nothing really special about it. I I considered buying a Blu-ray drive to put in, but even the DVDs, I don't use them all that often. I don't own any Blu-rays. I figured this was a place that I could skimp, and like I said, I don't use DVDs all that often. It's just nice to have it installed in the computer if you need it. And a lot of people that are doing custom builds these days aren't even installing DVD drives just because they don't use them anymore. So anyway, there's that. For backing up all of my data, I have a 1 terabyte Western Digital green drive, a little more energy efficient than some of their other drives. I don't need a high speed read and write capability since it's the backup, so that's sufficient. For my regular data, and then also I have a Windows partition on this computer. I have all that on a 1 terabyte Western Digital black drive. The black drives are a little faster, a little better performance than the green drives, so that's why I'm using the black right there. For my main operating system, which as of right now it is Ubuntu 15.10, I've got a 64 gigabyte Plexer mSATA SSD. Now, if you're not too familiar with mSATAs, they recently they've been superseded by the M2 drive, which is another little tiny guy. The mSATAs, you normally found those in laptops, and actually that's the reason that I've got this. I had picked up a used. It was one of the ThinkPad series. I can't remember which one it was, but anyway, I picked up one used on eBay, and then bought an mSATA to go along with it. And not too long after I had this whole setup, the motherboard crashed on the ThinkPad, and there were a few other things wrong with it. So long story short, I scrapped out the computer, but kept the components that were still good, which gave me this mSATA drive. 64 gigabytes, more than enough for virtually any Linux OS. And then finally, I have a Toshiba 100 gigabyte 2.5-inch drive. That is where I put my the OSs that I'm testing for my reviews. I put those on that particular drive. Now, you may be wondering why I am using a regular mechanical drive, and it's actually not even a high performance mechanical drive. Why am I using that for testing my OSs? Well, I'm trying to look for kind of worst case scenarios. If I see that it's running, fairly snappy and whatnot on a mechanical drive, then, logically it's going to really fly on an SSD. So that's kind of my reasoning behind that. Plus, I had and this is the same with my old computer. I had that left over from another project, so might as well put it to use. Before I installed the DVD drive, I needed to pull off one of the two 5.25-inch bay covers. So the whole front panel of this computer case pops right off, and then once it's popped off, it's just a matter of little pull tabs that you use to remove the dry bay covers. Took one of those off. I'm using the top dry bay cover, and then put the whole front cover back on. From that point, I can start putting the drives in. The DVD drive, it just slides in from the front. You'll hear it click into place, and it's locked down. And then essentially it's the same with the 3.5 inch and the 2.5 inch drives, the regular disk drives. You just slide them into place, and they will lock into place. So it's another one of the nice features about this case, as opposed to those of you that have worked on one of the OEM cases and everything is screwed down, and this is pretty much all toolless installation. So putting all those one in place, the only one that was a little dicey was for my MSATA drive. It really didn't lock into place. It's just kind of sitting in one of the 2.25 inch or 2.5 inch drive spots, and I kind of strapped it down with a cable tie so it wouldn't move around on me. For the time being, that's good enough and will do the job. Installing the RAM came next. Nothing especially complicated about installing RAM. Simply line up the pins on the bottom of the RAM module with one of your RAM slots, slide it into place, and press it down till you hear and feel an audible click. And at each end of the RAM slot, there's like two little tabs that you'll see those pop up into place once it locks into place. So I got this particular board uses DDR3 RAM. I had 4 modules, 4 gigabytes each, giving me 16 gigabytes of RAM. So with the RAM installed, it was time to do the wiring. Now I don't have a whole lot of video of the actual wiring, just because there was a lot of kind of standing there and looking at it and figuring out how I was going to lay it out, and couple of different tries of what routing of the wires worked out best, that sort of thing. But as much as possible, I tried to route at the very least the main cables across the back side, so they'll be kind of out of the way, out of view, that sort of thing. So got all that wired up. And a few things to remember when you're doing the wiring. Do not forget that CPU fan, because the last thing you want to do is overheat your CPU because you forgot to hook up the fan. So be sure to get that done. One little snag that I ran into, not really a problem, but something I didn't think about, was that for the case fan, there is only one case fan header on the motherboard. So what I ended up doing, originally I was just going to be like, well, I'll just run with one case fan initially, see how that works and whatnot. But then I ended up having to drive past Micro Center, so I ran in, got a really cheap fan controller, and to be perfectly honest, I cannot recommend this fan controller. It powered my other 2 fans. Like I mentioned at the beginning of the video, the case comes with 3 fans by default. It powers the other 2 fans, but as far as the slider controls for adjusting the speed of the fan, does not work at all. They're always on the same speed. Now, it's not really that big of a deal because, at least for the time being, I have way more cooling capacity than I need. So that's not too big of a deal, but it's kind of irritating that I went and I bought this fan controller and it doesn't really work that well. But anyway, so installed that fan controller, used the second of the 5.25 inch drive slots, put it in that spot, and then besides that, don't forget all of the stuff that's on your front panel, the USB, the power button, all that kind of stuff, and all of that hooks right up to the motherboard. The instructions that came with the motherboard were great as far as laying out where the electrical connections were and all that kind of stuff. So all that went down without a hitch. And then finally, after all the electrical was in place, I could put the 2 sides back on the case, and we were essentially done. Now, I didn't worry about, since I wanted to make sure that everything was up and running and working correctly. I went ahead and didn't worry about tying down the cables with cable ties and that sort of thing until after I did a test run of the computer. But first try out of the box, everything fired right up. I went right to the BIOS, got things set up there, and went on with installing my operating systems and all that. And that is essentially it. Um, you know, if it wasn't for doing all of the videotaping, I could have done this project in a couple of hours, but because of setting up for all the videos and taking pictures and all that whatnot, it probably was closer to about a day and a half that it took me to do this whole process. And because of all of the video clips that I had, it took me quite a while to do the actual editing for this video. But as you can see, the project is done, and starting this afternoon, I'm going to start looking at some OSs so we can do some more video reviews and get that show back on the road. Anyway, hope that you've enjoyed the video. Please, as always, leave questions, comments, all that kind of stuff down below, and I try to get to those as soon as possible. If you got some friends that are not subscribers to this YouTube channel, please subscribe. We'd love to have a few more subscribers, and I will see you all on the next video. Thanks a lot.